Hi, welcome to today's webinar. This is Steve Podrachik for Seattle Avionics. Today, or rather this particular session of the day, we're going to be doing a webinar on advanced FlyQ EFB. Okay, so as I said, this is a presentation made for folks who are already fairly used to the product. Nonetheless, I'm going to begin it by clicking on the FlyQ EFB magenta icon, starting the app now. As you can see, I have one of the weather layers on, the satellite layer on, and this is not a really fantastic day here in Seattle, or it looks like in most of the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of clouds in the area. A couple of things to talk about, or more than a couple of things. The thing about a FlyQ EFB Advanced presentation is I'm going to assume that you're reasonably familiar with the product. So I'm going to jump around a little bit more than I would otherwise. And one thing I would point out before we do anything else, if you want to find more information about any of the things that I'm demoing today, we have an extensive YouTube collection of videos. And just before I even start this, I want to show you how to get to that. You can either take a web browser and simply go to youtube.com/FlyQEFB, or if you're using the application, hit the settings button towards the top of the app, the one right above nautical miles to waypoint, looks like a gear, where it talks about, in the help section is right on top. Remember that as we ship new versions of the product, we always produce a web page that tells you what's new. You can review that by tapping the first one, what's new in this release. So this is the release that we built in September. So this is FlyQ EFB 4.01, the one where we did a massive number of performance improvements, substantially improved Avidyne support, iPhone support, and so on. We're gonna hit the close button now. But the other part to get to all the other videos that we do is to go to the second choice there that says technical support/help. So you tap on that. And the very first item there is about the videos. If you click on the video link, if you don't miss, if you click on the video link, you go to the YouTube channel. And in the YouTube channel, we have something like 82 or 83 videos. It covers a lot of ground. The first category, uploads, just shows you everything that we've done in terms of recent uploads, right in chronological order. Where you may want to begin though, is taking a look at things like the 7-day challenge. You probably already, if you're an advanced user, looked at these, but you may want to look again. In fact, if you tap on the part that says 7-day challenge tutorials, about the middle of the screen, it shows you the entire video list. And there are a number of videos in this. So if you want to, for example, review, because the weather's going bad, you want to review weather and you want to review IFR flying, in about 10 minutes you can do that. If you want to review flight planning or airport information or whatever you want to, that's there as well. So I'm going to go back to FlyQ EFB now and close this. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's also a very large document, which is what we call the pilot's guide. You can get to that by tapping on the documents tab, which is a tab on the far right corner. I use my account for testing, so most people don't have this many documents downloaded. I have like all of the AFDs, many of the Class B diagrams, many of the margin notes, which, by the way, if you haven't seen any of the margin notes, I'm going to click on one. These are what the margin notes are, essentially snippets, you could say, from the sectionals. So you can look at these and very quickly see special use airspace and that kind of thing for a given margin, for a given sectional. Anyway, what you probably would want to look at is, to find out more information, take a look at the pilot's guide, which is the icon about the middle of the, about midway down the screen on the left side, pilot's guide. Inside there, you have a 181-page document, and I believe that even within the PDF reader, this should be clickable. So, for example, if I want to see more information about using it with the Avidyne system, tap on 139, and it jumps immediately to the spot telling me how to connect FlyQ EFB to an IFD from Avidyne, or to Skyview or anything like that. So again, this is just further information. So after we're done with this demonstration today, there'll still be quite a lot more to go. This will give you some sense of where to go to find out more. Okay, let's go back to the mapping tab. One thing that people ask about sometimes is, in about 2 seconds, the tab bar at the bottom of the screen will disappear, just like that. As you probably know, you can tap on the map it'll come back, it'll stay on the screen for about 6 seconds, and then it'll go away. If you want to change that, either to make it shorter or to make it never go away, you can do that. You do that through, like many things in the product, you do that by hitting the settings button. Again, the settings button is the gear icon at the top of the screen, roughly in the middle of my screen. So I'll tap on that, and up pops settings. Now, there are a number of things there. As you scroll down the list, you have things that generally have to do with the display or on the display category, like, for example, which aircraft marker do you want to use? You can pick colors and sizes, for example, there. Course line and rings, you can set them up to either be time-based or distance-based. So, for example, when they're distance-based, either the course line or the ring are spaced apart based on specific distances. When they're time-based, they take a look at how long you'll fly at your current speed. So a number of little things like that. You can change units and so on and so forth. But let's go down to how long things last on the screen. We scroll down the list a little bit to preferences. And there's a number of categories that say auto hide the tab bars about the middle of the screen or so. In fact, let me see if I can pull up a highlighter. Sometimes this works, not all the time. Let me see if I can do that, spotlight. So you may be able to see a red dot on the screen. I don't really know, but there's a line that says auto hide the tab bars in roughly the middle of the screen, and it's currently set after 6 seconds. If you tap on after 6 seconds, you can choose to make it faster at 2 seconds or never. So I'll set it, for example, to never. At this point, the tab bar will not go away for the rest of the demo, which might be handy. So there are a lot of things that you can get to in settings. Time allowing, I'm going to get to a lot more of those, but I just want to give you that one tip for the time being. Other things based on the screen. We think we do a pretty good job coming up with the gauges at the top of the screen in terms of which ones are the default. The gauges, of course, are the things like altitude, feet 177 at the top of the screen, waypoint, WPT, Seattle, nautical miles to waypoint 21.1, and so on. However, you can change those, and if you didn't know that, this is useful to know. For example, if I didn't need to know my ETE to waypoint, I can press and hold on that, and that pops a list. It's categorized, so I can scroll down into other flight planning sort of things, ETE to landing, distance to landing, closest waypoint, timers and clock. Like, for example, if you wanted to look at a Zulu clock, okay, that'll show you the Zulu clock or the UTC clock, depending on which flavor of nomenclature you prefer. So also, let's take a look at the way the timers work. So if I tap on the timer, and this is a single tap, not a press and hold, I can set a timer, which is a countdown timer, to say 5 minutes, tell it to start, and now you notice that it's counting down. In 5 minutes, it's going to blink orange or red or something like that, telling me that the timer has expired, and we'll get to that. I'm going to press on ETE to landing, though, and show you the difference between that and the stopwatch. The timer is a counted down timer. The stopwatch, when I tap on it, simply has a start, and it does just what you would think. It simply keeps counting up and up and up. For either one of those, if you tap on it, like I'll tap on stopwatch 1 at the top, I can restart it to the same, to 0 in this case. I can pause it or I can stop it. So that's pause, stops at 15 seconds. Tap it again, press resume. On the other hand, with a timer, I have a choice of doing things like I can restart it, which means go back to 5 minutes, or I can pause it and stop it. So a couple of things there. One other one that's I think useful to know, I'll click on the stopwatch 1 again. Well, actually 2 others. One is AGL, and I'm going to pick bearing to waypoint 2, and VSR. What are those? So I'm going to turn on the simulator. I hope you know how to do that already. But I'll get a little bit more into that later. But say that I'm flying along right now. Notice that the VSR gauge towards the top of the screen has a triangle, a white triangle facing down saying 83. That means, I don't know offhand where I am in this flight plan or even what this flight plan is, but it means that at the current location that we are, if we start hitting down at 84 feet per minute, we will hit pattern altitude just about the point about 5 miles away from the airport. And you can configure that distance, by the way, in settings. But 5 miles away from the airport, you'll be at pattern altitude. The AGL number, on the other hand, is very handy. If you take a look at AGL, at the far right hand of the screen, it says 669, 668, so on like that. Compare that to the altitude number, which is on the far left side, which is your GPS, or what you may call geometric altitude. That is not the same, by the way, as pressure altitude. It really is GPS altitude. So by doing this, you have a good sense of knowing essentially how far off the ground you are. By looking at both the above ground level and at the MSL number, the altitude number, it can be some very useful information if you're flying in a tight space. Let's talk about now some of the tabs. I'm going to go through the tabs at the bottom of the screen to a certain extent in order, beginning at airports on the far left side. So let's begin at airports. You've probably seen this screen before, the screen that shows you your nearest airports. Remember that I have the simulator on. So I'm not actually, from the applications perspective, I'm not sitting at my desk in Woodinville, Washington right now. I'm somewhere near Oregon, in Corvallis, Oregon. So this means that, of course, the top airport, Corvallis Muni, is 6.9 nautical miles away. You can see that because next to the KCVO, there's a magenta icon, and then it says 6.9 nautical miles. Now, since it updates automatically every 10 seconds or so, it now says 7.9. This you probably know on the product already. But again, let me talk about the buttons on the screen. The buttons on the screen here, the first one on the left side is of course a direct to symbol. So that will do two things. If you have a flight plan loaded and you do a direct to, if that flight plan already includes that airport, but there are other waypoints in the middle, hitting direct to will remove the airports or the other affixes in the middle between your current position and that airport and just bring you direct to that, skipping those points. If, however, that airport is not already on your flight plan, then it will create a whole new flight plan because it has no idea how to modify the existing one. It will create a new flight plan from your existing location to Corvallis. Plus FP, on the other hand, means add to flight plan, and it modifies an existing one always. So I'll just tap on that. I won't do it. But by tapping on that, you tell it where you want the new point to be inserted above, or if you go down to the bottom, you can do that. And there's a button there that says add to end. If you want to create a flight plan by tapping on the map, you could use plus FP and keep saying add to end, add to end, add to end, add to end, and so on. Something that you may not realize that you can do, though, is you can set up favorites. So for example, I'm going to type in my home airport. So that's PAE. I'm going to tap randomly on it anywhere, and there's a star above the ident that says KPAE, the large one anyway, with the icon next to it, is a white star. When I tap on it, it's now activated as a favorite. So when I go back to my nearby list, I have two other lists that are comparable. There are three tabs: nearby, favorites, and recents. Recents will bring me to all the airports that I've looked at in the last 24 hours or something, or actually more accurately, the last like 100 airports I've looked at. But the one in the middle, favorites, will show me the airports that I've specifically designated as favorites. Of course, to turn it off as a favorite, you simply tap on the blue star again, it turns to white, it is no longer a favorite. Fairly straightforward to do. Some other things that you may not realize while we're on the airport screen, one of the beauties, one of the things we really focus on in FlyQ is not just providing the airport information and other information in a very click efficient way, our rule of two, as you probably know, but also to make it readable for people who are reading glasses like me, and statistically speaking, probably like you. The way that we do this is we often have places where you can tap to see it larger. You've probably seen in the weather tab, if you tap on the METAR or you tap on the TAF, so I'm going to tap on the METAR now, you see it nice and big and easy to read. You can scroll it, of course, if you need to. By the way, you can. There's a button at the top of that pop-up on the right side that says translated, which is on now, or raw. You can do that either way. Tap off it or click done, either way, gets rid of it. You probably already knew about that one. But did you know that, let's move back to the general tab. If you tap anywhere in the large box towards the top of airports, it says elevation, pattern altitude, maximum runway. Just tap anywhere there, and you see the same information presented in the list order in about twice the font size. Very easy to see. Similarly, if you go down to COM or runways, I'll tap on COM now, you see it nice and big and easy to read. Tap off. If I tap on a particular runway, you see the runways. Even I can read that without my glasses quite easily. So there are a few other things like that in terms of size we think people really like a lot. Let's talk about some things on the weather tab. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of the screen, move from the selected airports on the left, move over one to weather. This is essentially the same screen that you saw before, but I want to point out a couple of things that people often miss. At the very top of it, above where it says local, regional, and your national radar, it has the current temperature, which looks like right now is 57 degrees, expected high and expected low. But in the middle of it, it also has a 7-day forecast. This feature has been in the product since the very first version of the product. So a lot of folks have asked for a long time forecasts in the future. We've always had it. It tells you Tuesday, Tuesday night, Wednesday, Wednesday night, and so on. Very handy, very easy to use system. Other things, let's say that I tap on my local radar. So I'm going to tap on the local radar. You see it nice and big and it's animated. If you look very closely at it, on the top, the bottom, and to the right side of it are little gray arrows. If I tap on one, like let's say I'm taking a flight plan and I'm going south, I don't have to jump around to all the different map screens. I can simply hit the directional buttons to go to the adjacent map. So for example, if I hit the down button near Roseburg, which is in Oregon, if I tap on that, I see the slightly more south radar. Tap it again, I continue moving south. Maybe if I was then wanted to go a little bit to the east, I tap on the one on the right side, and so on. So a very quick way to navigate around the product without having to jump around a lot. One other a couple of other things. Let's go to the Maps tab. So inside the Maps tab, let me back up a little bit. You see we do have quite a lot of stuff on the screen today with the radar. Do you know that you can control the radar opacity? So for example, if you zoom in here, and if you find that it's a little difficult to read the map behind the green, on the top of the screen, there's a series of buttons. So the search box, the padlock. The next one is the brightness control, which began life as being strictly a brightness control. But over the course of the evolution of the product, also turned into a way to modify the radar opacity and the procedure and the map opacity. So I'll tell you what, let me put both of those on the screen. Here, by the way, is a quick way to put up the procedures. I double tapped on the Eugene Airport, Milan Suite field. Notice that on the 4 buttons there, direct to flight plan, and then there's a button that looks like a piece of paper. That piece of paper is the same symbol. If you look down the bottom at the tab bar, that's the same symbol that we use for procedures. So we know immediately by tapping on this airport that it has procedures, and you can jump immediately to the procedures at that airport by tapping on it, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to hit that, and I see that procedure. If I want to put that procedure on the map, there's a button on the right-hand side, roughly a third of the way down the screen, that looks like a small map. I will click on that, and now I see my procedure on the screen. Now, let's get back to the brightness control part. So if I tap on the brightness control at the top, not only do I have screen brightness, which I can't show you in a presentation, it only works on a real iPad, but see what happened when you take the radar opacity. I'll make it more opaque by moving it to the right. Notice that the green is totally opaque. You can't see anything behind it. Versus if you move it all the way to the other direction, you can barely see it. The default is probably somewhere in the middle. Same thing with the approach plates. On the approach plate, it's about 60% opaque right now. If I take it all the way to the right, it becomes completely opaque. And if I take it all the way down to the left, it becomes very hard to see. Okay. A couple of minor points too, just hopefully you know this if you're flying IFR, but when you put the plate on the map, that is a super handy way to modify your flight plan. For example, if I have this flight plan up and I want to modify this to hit, where will be good? In the upper right corner of kind of the right middle-ish of the plate, the initial approach fix is SHED, S-H-E-D-D. If I take my flight plan line, press and hold, I can move that over to SHED. Then one thing to notice about, this is another feature, I'm glad this came up. Very often people get a little bit confused to say, well, I tapped near a fix, why doesn't it show the fix? It does, but there's 4 buttons, 4 tabs down the bottom of the pop-up. The white one right now is common, meaning that's selected. Next to that is airports, nav aids, and fixes. If there are nav aids or airports near wherever you tap, it assumes you're most likely to want to get an airport or a nav aid because those are used more. But if it really is a fix, you go all the way to the tab on the right-hand side, select Fixes, and there's my friend Shed. So if I tap anywhere in that cell, doesn't really matter where, there you go. Flight plan is now modified. So it's very quick and very easy to modify a flight plan, literally, as I say, on the fly by putting it on the map, then dragging and dropping it over the points on the map. Very simple, very, very easy way to do that. Let's talk about downloading data. Not the most sexy thing in the world, but pretty important. So to download data, as you probably know, you tap on the button. It looks like a down arrow towards the top middle of the screen. I tap on that. A couple of things I do want to point out that people often don't know. Green, of course, is good in FlyQ, red is bad. Pretty standard. You probably know that by now. But it says down the bottom, or not down the bottom, where it says regions, it says tap to select states for which you want chart data. Double tap a state to see detailed information about it. Aha. So let's say I want to know more information about what data I have downloaded for Kansas. If I double tap on Kansas, I get a pop-up giving me my this usual green and red. So I know that my digital data and my TFRs are good. I see the expiration dates for my VFR products, for my IFR products. I know that I didn't change my default settings. So because those dots are gray, down towards the middle of the pop-up, IFR high altitude charts says not selected for download. Gulf of Mexico charts, not selected. Helicopter charts, not selected. So it's telling me what I have selected and what I don't. On the other hand, if I double tap on Missouri, double tap here, I do have the digital data, TFRs, and fuel prices downloaded from Missouri. Now, why is that? I have that because those are all downloaded all together, so you get those automatically. If I take a look at things like, but I don't have my VFR charts, my IFR terminal charts, or my low altitude. So you immediately know what kind of data you have available and what kind of data for each state you need. Very convenient to have. Let's talk a little bit about how you deselect data and how you delete data. In the current version of FlyQ, you can deselect a state just by tapping on it. So I can turn off Missouri, turn off Kansas, turn off Colorado, just by tapping on each of those individually. In the case of Missouri, we really haven't downloaded any data, so there's nothing to delete. We did, however, have data downloaded for Colorado and Kansas. We did not delete those by deselecting them. What deselecting simply means is don't update them again in the future when you click the big Update Now button in the upper right corner. It does not delete any data. Similarly, on the map itself, in the lower left corner of it, there's some blue text that says Clear All. If I tap Clear All, I'm not going to do that right now, but if I tap on Clear All, it will deselect, that is, take away the highlights on all of the states, but it won't delete any data. If you want to actually delete data, it's a little bit clunky, to be honest with you. What we do is, there's a blue button next to most of the data products that delete not by state, but they delete the data by type. So, for example, let's move the VFR charts for now in the middle of the screen. If I click the button that says delete all sectional data, it will delete all the sectionals for all states from the product, okay? That's actually not as bad as you think, because what you end up doing is, let's say that you wanted to delete the data from 5 of the 6 states you had selected, but keep the data for state number 6. What you do is you say delete all data, delete all sectional data, which will delete all 6. Then you go back to the top of your map and you select, in this case, the one state that you really want. Let's say it's New York. So if you only want data for New York, you deselect the other states, you delete all the data, then you just hit Update Now again, and you get just the data for New York, and you've saved all the other space. Should also point out that certain things on the map you may not realize we have. For example, if you haven't flown down south recently, you may want to, especially if the weather looks like it does here, wherever you are. So we have the full maps for all of Mexico, for the Gulf of Mexico, for the Caribbean. We also have them if you want to fly to Central America, to, for example, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, whatever you may want to do. All of those are available as well. And again, there's different types of data that you can download. You can download, for example, if you do fly, especially helicopters, say in the Gulf of Mexico, you can turn on the Gulf of Mexico charts, Or if you want the helicopter charts, which are part of many of the major cities, most notably Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, things like that, you can turn on the helicopter charts. Also, let's talk about the difference between high resolution terrain towards the middle of the screen and low resolution terrain. The high resolution terrain is very big. It takes up a very high percentage of all the data space that FlyQ uses. It's only used for one thing though. It's only used for the 3D synthetic vision system. So if you never use the 3D synthetic vision, you can remove that, not download it. On the other hand, the low resolution terrain data is used for things like TAWS, that is hazard avoidance. So, and it's also relatively small. So please do not turn off low resolution terrain. But if you want to turn off any terrain to save space, turn off the high resolution terrain. Okay, so that's a little bit about the data on here. Some other features that are in the product. Let me pull up the data manager once again. I just want to show you something. So it looks like we're taking a flight here. The magenta line on the map shows us our flight plan line. So we're going from the Seattle area through Oregon, down through California to, I think, San Francisco. Okay, now, if you're in a big hurry, we had all these other states downloaded too. Like New York was New York was red. I think Missouri was red, and so on. But if we're just doing a flight on the West Coast, we, for the moment, don't really care about that. There's a button next to the download manager, which is, the download arrow, that looks like an airplane taking off. It's right above waypoint naughty. So let me tap on that airplane taking off icon. This is what we call our pre-flight checklist. The pre-flight checklist goes through and uses the familiar green, good, red, bad systems to try to figure out what data we need just for the states that we encounter on that particular flight. So it tells you quickly no downloads are required, everything's green, and so on. So we have all the data. That's, however, a very handy feature if I were to, let's say, modify my flight plan a little bit. Let's say let me grab on the line here and move it someplace here. Just pick a nav aid, made a bit of a mess, but okay, there we go. Now, when I look at my download manager, I didn't move it nearly enough. Okay, well, the point was that if I selected another state, it would probably tell me that I needed to download more data because I'd be going into either Idaho or Nevada or something like that, but I blew it. Okay, other things. Do you fly at night? If you do fly at night, a feature that I very strongly recommend that you look at is a night mode on the product. Next to the gear icon, which is settings, towards the middle of the screen, is a circle that's half black and half white. I'm going to tap on that, and now we're in night mode. Notice that is not the same. I'm going to actually do this right now. Go turn that off again, and triple click, or however you do this. I think Apple may have changed this, but there's a way in the iPad to invert all the colors on the screen. So black is white, but it also means that green becomes like purple and red becomes blue or something like that. That's not what night mode does. As you can see, the green radar is still the green radar and so on. My aircraft icon is still blue. All of the colors that are not close to black or not close to white do not invert. They just stay the same color. So that means if you have an approach plate that's colored, you see the actual terrain color. I'm going to turn on the TAWS layer. When you turn TAWS on, all the colors are still as they should be. Yellow is a warning that you're within 1,000 feet of it, and TAWS orange or red means that you are in fact below it, and it'd be a really bad idea to fly there. Another button that's new in this product relatively recently is the bell icon. The bell icon is our notification icon. The notification icon is used for a lot of things. It was originally put in so that when you use the flights feature, where you can attach to various friends and such, you know when they took a flight. But we also made it available for other things. For example, you may notice every 28 days that you see a message just reminding you that the new data cycle has began. And if you tap there, it brings you to the download manager so you can confirm that all your states are green. It also can be used for things like telling you, like in this case, that webinars are coming up. And if you want to sign up for them, just tap on them and boom, here's webinar week. Bottom line is if you see a little red icon like a 1 or a 2 or something next to that, you should probably take a look at it. It'll either give you something like telling you that maybe a new version of the product is available, that we're doing a Black Friday sale, hint, 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 starting in a couple of days, that new data is available, that we've done some testing on a new version of iOS and you need to read about it, things like that. So the notification icon is pretty important. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the weather features. So I'm going to go back to the weather tab. You hopefully already know about the winds aloft feature, where if I tap, if I go from the nearby button to the winds tab, I see where I am relative to the headwinds. So in this particular case, you know what, this is a little bit boring. I'm going to take my simulator and move this to a different spot in the flight. Hopefully you know about that. Maybe one other place, two other, let's see. Unfortunately, it's not really being very kind to me, but okay. At whatever spot of the flight that we are right now, green is good, red is bad. All I see on the screen right now is red, which is unfortunate. What that means is that at our current altitude, which looks like it's about 7,000 feet, I can tell that by the gray bar in the middle of that histogram of that graph display. The gray bar is between the 8,000, and the 6,000, so we're at about 7,000. The annoying part, though, is that the red bars next to it read -25 and -18. That means, of course, because of the direction that we're heading, and if you look at the diagram above showing the wind arrow relative to the nose of the aircraft, it's pretty clear what's happening. We have a 20-knot wind, 29-knot headwind, which we're hitting not quite head on, but pretty darn close. That's why we have such a strong headwind and why we see the red bars. If we were flying in such a way that we had green bars, meaning there was a tailwind, you'd see nice happy green bars at different altitudes. This is very useful, of course, for knowing should you fly higher or should you fly lower. In this case, it means what's the best I can do in a bad situation. In other cases, you can often go from having a headwind to a tailwind. So it's extremely handy to be able to have. Let's take a look at some of the flight planning stuff. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on flight planning, which I would normally do in an advanced presentation. I'm not going to do that specifically though, because we've never done this before. The flight planning stuff, there's so much to go into and so many details that we actually broke that apart into two other presentations. We have an introduction to flight planning and we have an advanced flight planning class. So I'm not going to go into all the details, but I will bring up a couple of highlights. One is you may notice that we're looking at the navlog and the font may be a little bit bigger than you used to, because most of the time it looks like that. How did I do that? If you take a look at the blue buttons right above the navlog, you see a little a and a big A, the word wind optimizer, the word reverse, clear, and edit. If you tap on the one that looks like a little a and a big A, it toggles between big fonts and little fonts, just like that. Pretty handy. Little thing is kind of handy here. Sometimes you want to take that flight plan string and you want to put it into, for some reason, another product. You can tap on that part that says KPAE, and you can actually select that text. You can, sometimes it's a little tricky to do, but you can select the text and then you can say copy. And then you can paste that into, what is that? This is something new in iOS 13. I've never seen this before. That's nice. Anyway, so there's a way to copy that text and to do other things with it. You can also hit the reverse button to obviously reverse the flight plan to go from, we're going from Painfield down to San Francisco, so that reverses it. There's a wind optimization system too, where if you tap on wind optimize, it shows you in this table very clearly at different altitudes what your duration of flight total would be. It looks like in this case, pretty major difference between say 11,000 feet and 1,000 feet, and what difference you have in fuel burn. And you can use that to pick one. So for example, if I decided that the best trade-off here for me was maybe to fly at, let's say 9,000 feet. If I tap on the road that says 9,000, notice behind me, by the way, before I do this, that all the altitudes in the flight plan are currently at 7,000. If I tap on the road that says 9,000, yep, confirm that. And now all of them are set to 9,000. It recalculates the wind speed, the wind direction, the ground speed, the true airspeed, and so on, fuel added, fuel used, whatever. So all of that recomputes for you. Other things in weather that you can do, you probably already know this. The weather briefing, if it were current, okay, well, this is great. So in this case, the weather briefing can't be done because it's in the past. Okay, which is true because I used this flight plan a few hours ago. So here's how you change the time on the flight plan. On anything that's blue, you can click on in the product pretty much universally. So towards the top of the plans tab, right below the word plans, it says time, November 18th, 2019, 12:32 p.m. Blue. So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to pick a different time. Let's say maybe make this at 7:45 tonight. Okay. There are two buttons below there that say change and cancel. I'll click on change. Things will recalculate in a few seconds. So the ETE, the winds and all that stuff will recompute. If I go to the weather briefing, notice I now have a weather briefing, okay? Because now the time is in the future and it's giving me the weather briefing that's specific to my new flight. So again, if you change the time, the weather briefing gets automatically requested and done for you. To file the flight plan, you tap on ICAO plan right here. Anything that's white, like say type of flight, general aviation, proposed 13B, proposed departure time, all of those things you can click on and change. Like for cruise speed, I'll tap on 115. You can enter a new number if you want to, right there. I won't bother. And oh, by the way, what I did there to get rid of it was there's a keyboard button on the iPad in the bottom right-hand corner. I tapped on that to get rid of it. Okay, so that's your ICAO flight plan. That's how you get a briefing. Something else I should point out that's kind of fun is I'm going to tab away for a second to my web browser and go here. So FlyQ EFB, when you file a flight plan, it goes through Latos. So actually, let's do that again in a second. So I will go back here and I will tap the file button. There's a blue button that says file right below the word navlog. So let's file this. Okay, I've now successfully filed my flight plan. I see my flight identifier, I get the receipt, all of that good stuff. A couple of handy things here. If I want to make sure they save that just in case there's a problem and I want to keep a copy, there's a button in the upper right-hand corner that looks like a box with an arrow coming out. That's the generic Apple icon for send to or share stuff or something like that button. So I'm going to tap on that button in the upper right corner and I will say save that to my documents. So now that is saved. And just ask me where I want to put it. I happen to have created folders, so I want to save this under PAE because I took off from PAE. If you wanted to, you can hit the action button and email it to yourself. So I can pull up email and just send it like that. Or you can even, if you have what's called an AirPrint printer, you can print it immediately. All of those systems work. Anyway, I now have a copy of it. But what I wanted to show you was if I flick back to this, to a web browser, if I go to the Latos Flight Service tab, that I think I have selected here. Come on, let me select it. That's weird. Come on, Safari. I've never seen this happen before. It's not letting me select anything. Okay, we will quit Safari and I'll try that again. So open up Safari and you type in 1-800 weather brief. Let's see, 1-800. There's something that the system definitely doesn't like about what I'm doing here today. So I guess I'm not going to type that in. But the idea is you can go to 1-800 weather brief and you can link in what you have there to your FlyQ account. So all the flight plans that you create can go back to you and you actually see them listed in Latos. Okay, other things. Let's talk a little bit about the flights tab. The flights tab is the third tab over. It's essentially the logbook. You can think of it that way. This is added in FlyQ 4.0. The point behind this is it has two tabs towards the top, one that says flight following and one that says my flights logbook. I'm going to select my flights logbook. At this point, everything here, this is a logbook, a visual logbook of all the flights that I personally have taken. On here, most of them are actually test flights, but you get the general idea. You see a map. If you want to replay any of these flights, there's a blue play button, so I can hit that, do that right now. Tap on one of the play buttons. And now that's one of my recorded flights. Let's turn off the radar. Let's turn off night mode. and we're playing it. You can use the same flight simulator that is elsewhere in the product to also, weird, there we go. You can use the same flight simulation system here to move to a different spot in the flight, to make it go faster, things like that. Let's go back to the Flights tab. The thing about this is it tells me very quickly at the top of all the flights that I've taken, there's a section at the top that says flights, 480. It's a lot of flights. As I said, it's mostly fiction. Duration, 764 hours and so on. That's just my flights. However, if I have some other people that I fly with, I can select flight following. I could be, for example, an instructor and I have students. I can fly with 5 or 6 other guys a lot. I may have a flight club or a corporate flight department. All of those are shown to people. So right now I'm attached to a friend of mine, Michael Prime. So I see his flights. I can play those back. I can give him thumbs up, that kind of thing. But it's super nice to know what flights he's been taking, and you ask him why the heck he didn't invite me to go along with him, things like that. You can also do various reports. Towards the top of that, it has my profile, friends, and reports. If I tap on reports, I have a choice between text-based reports and graphs. So I can select, for example, a graph to show me my monthly activity as a bar graph. Takes the system a couple of seconds to generate that. Here we go. So there's our monthly activity, covering maybe a little bit too many months. So you can actually change that. Inside the time setting, you can say, how about in the last 90 days? Then when you regenerate that, it's only covering, it's my aircraft, it's only covering my activity in the last 3 months. So it looks like I haven't flown a lot in November, which is true. Been busy preparing for these presentations and for Black Friday and such. So there's a lot that you can do here. The final thing I'll show you is if you do have other pilots who you're friends with, I highly recommend you go to the Flights tab, click the button that says Friends, and a couple of things. It'll show you anyone that you're already following or people that are following me. It looks like a fair number of people. But it has a fun thing called Suggestions. Suggestions takes a look at the people who are flying in your area, frequently from your airport, and it gives you some suggestions on people who may be doing some flying that you'd be interested in. Or you can type in the name of somebody. For example, my friend Mike Prime, I can type in Prime, and I see he will probably pop up. Takes it a second to scan through. We have an awful lot of users of the system, so it does take the system a little bit to find all the people that are associated there. But now you see Mike. You can also do this by airport. This doesn't work particularly well if you fly from a really popular airport. Like if you type in BFI, Boeing Field, there's a lot of pilots who fly there. So if I type in BFI, I believe it's going to come back to me and say, well, sorry, there are just too many people there to be interesting. But if I were to type in something like CLM, it'll show me all the other pilots who are flying from that area. There you go. So for example, if I flew out of CLM, I may want to select one of these people and hit the button that says request to follow, so I can see where they're flying and learn more about their flying and see what we have in common and so on. So that's a bit more about the Flights tab. One other thing, when you look at flights, if this takes up too much space for you, not really a problem. What you can do, let me go back to GoToMeeting here. Okay, one of the things that you can do that's kind of nice is you can hit a button towards the top near the GPS locator at the upper right-hand corner of the screen. It looks like a bunch of lines. That will make this a very compact view. It gets rid of the graphic basically and just shows you the logbook. So that's normal view, that's compact view, just like that. Okay, other things that people ask about on the maps. So let's talk a little bit about the map view. Let me just change one thing if I could here for a second. Just trying to get rid of that thing in the middle of the screen. Okay, so can't seem to get rid of it, but well, that's it, that's life. So very often people ask questions about two things. I'm going to turn on map layers for personal waypoints and for procedures. So procedures are already on. So let's pull up a procedure for, say, SeaTac. Again, I can do that just by tapping here. And since CTAC has approach procedures, I can just hit the approach procedure button. And I'm simply swiping left and right now, nothing else. So I'll take this procedure, hit the button that looks like a little map, put on the map. Okay. So now the question, and most people don't have this many personal waypoints, of course, especially one, probably not one called don't fly here. But people will often say, well, how do I get rid of those things? Well, okay, it's actually a good question. So two things. To get rid of an approach plate that you put on the map, you tap, it's a layer. So you tap on the layer stack of paper icon, and where it says procedures, deselect it. That's it. Now it's off. So now it's on, now it's off. Very straightforward. To get rid of an approach, to get rid of a personal procedure, a little more complicated. You go to the settings button at the top of the screen, and you go down to flight planning. Flight planning are your lists of things like the list of pilot profiles, aircraft profiles, personal waypoints. Oh, personal waypoints. So tap on personal waypoints. If I want to get rid of the one that says FRYDK ferry dock, I can click on ferry dock, and there's a delete button. So I will delete that. Boom, done. So that's how you delete personal waypoints. Also, I should point out, if you use FlyQ Online, you can use the import function to suck in either comma separated list from a spreadsheet, or actually, yeah, I mean, basically put in a CSV list of all the different waypoints you want, and you can import them into FlyQ. Or you can take the existing waypoints that you have and use FlyQ Online to export those as a text file, give it to someone else. So for example, if you're part of a Civil Air Patrol group and you have 500 waypoints that you guys use, no problem. One person create it, do on FlyQ Online, do an export, and email that to the other folks in the group, and they can suck them in about 2 minutes. It's very easy to do. Let's see. Let's talk about procedures. Okay, so we've talked about procedures already a lot, but one of the things I want to point out is when you do have a flight plan up, so we have a flight plan from Painfield. So let me pull up the procedures at Pain, kind of doing this the slow way, but I'll tap the procedures. Let's talk a lot about what the screen actually does, because there's a lot here to it. You can set up the system, and by default, it's like this. The toolbar on the left-hand side of the procedures will go away after a few seconds, like that. Again, you can go into settings like we did for the tab bar at the bottom. You can make those so they never go away. But I'm going to bring them up now. A couple of things I can do. The top button makes them full screen, which you may say, oh, that's silly. Why would I do full screen there? Well, here's why. Let's say that you're in split screen mode. You're flying along. You pull up a particular procedure. You see it nice and small there. Now, if you want to see it full screen, you can tap that full screen button, and boom, there it is. Okay. So that's one very, very good way of doing this. The other button below it, let me see if I can find exactly where I am in the flight. So I'm going to hit the map button. Oh, right, I'm doing this. Okay, so we are near, right, that approach procedure at Painfield. Okay, so let's pull up the procedures. And let me just make sure I have this set to one thing that I may have changed. Show air. There's a switch, in case any of you were watching the presentation earlier today, there was a point where I was expecting the aircraft to be on the approach plate and it wasn't. That's because I realized I was testing something earlier in the day, and I turned off the button that says towards the middle of the screen here, show aircraft marker on map and procedure. Okay, so let's turn that back on, hit done, flip to a different procedure, and those should come onto the screen eventually. So the general idea here is that you can set this so that it's either a track up mode, can center onto it, or, so let's try an approach procedure at Painfield. There we go. So now we're on Painfield. I can set the system to be track up or north up, or to center on the chart. The center on the chart is pretty handy because notice what it's doing. As the aircraft is moving, you see the aircraft is actually staying in the same spot on the screen, but the approach plate is moving, which is pretty unusual. I'm going to actually turn off the simulator here, and I think just for fun, I'm going to put on a more normal flight plan. So I'm going to go back to my flight plans list, load this one, and then go back to my simulator and begin to play this. And we're going to turn the radar off. Anyway, so you can do that. You can also set it to be track up versus north up on the display. Those are using those buttons on the side. You can do that on the procedure view. So track up or north up. You can also turn on gauges. So much like on the map, you can turn on the gauge bar. So you see the bearing to the waypoint, estimated time, and so on. All of that's on the screen and available to you as well. So pretty slick way to go. So there's a lot more that you can do with procedures than you probably think. And of course, making full screen can be very handy there. Notice also that when you make it full screen, you have an additional search box at the top. So if we wanted to switch airports, like not be Payne Field, but we wanted to make that something like, I don't know, BFI, I can type Boeing Field International in there. And now I have the approach plates for Boeing. Final thing to point out here is there's a button about 3 from the bottom that looks like a list. Click on that, and you can pick from any item in the list. And it shows you that particular approach plate. Notice that the list also doesn't go away until you tap off it. So it makes it very easy to find different items in the list, just like what we're looking at now. There's also a lock button at the top of the screen. So when you lock it that way, again, if you're on an approach right now, the system won't be moving around on you. It will stay locked to that procedure. Tap on it again to get rid of it, and so on. Final thing I think I want to show here to do with procedures is citizen stars. So I'm going to look at my list view and take a look at we're going to go back to Payne Field because we have a flight plan from Payne. So I'm actually tapping on Payne on the nav log. That's the fastest way to get to it from my airport info. I'll tap procedures, scroll down a little bit to my departure procedure. And you may notice on the screen, there's a plus FP button on the right-hand side next to procedures. Unfortunately, in this case, I can't do it because the citizen star is vector-based. Let's try San Francisco. I'd be willing to bet they have procedures at San Francisco that we can use. All right, so let's look at the procedure and look at an arrival procedure. So let's take, say, the Big Sur 3. I'll pick plus FP. And notice what it gives me. It gives me a list where I can add to my flight plan automatically using the Big Sur 3 BSR transition. Whatever entry point I like, I can pick maybe the skunk entry point, and whatever exit point I like. When I hit plus FP, that gets added to my flight plan. So let's take a look at our flight plan right down here. Notice what we see added. That towards the end of the flight, we have skunk, Boulder, and Menlo added, and it specifically says that they're part of the Big Sur 3 arrival procedure. So that's a really handy feature. You can remove it by tapping on the button that says minus FP on the screen, or you can pick another arrival procedure to that same airport, and it will automatically replace the one that's there in favor of the new one. So those are probably some things that you may not have known. One final thing maybe to do with documents, you can add not just a document, you can add a folder to this. I'm gonna just go into full screen mode here to make things a little easier to see. And from documents, when you hit the plus button in the corner, you may be familiar with doing add document. And add document lets you pick from a variety of different things like FAA publications or FAA charts. Anything that's not currently green you can add. So I can add the Baltimore Washington TAC. But notice that I have more categories than you probably have. You can use FlyQ Online to create your own personal groups. So like corporate fleet or seaplane owners or SA Corp. You can use FlyQ Online to do that. And then when you select one of those, you see items in the list that only people who are members of that same group see. Pretty handy. So for a particular plane, whatever you want to do. You can also add in photographs that you've taken. You can type in any URL you like, so you can point it to a document on the web. This tells you how to take an email that someone sends you and add it to your app. Or you can use, as I said, FlyQ Online to create any of these points. But the point I was really trying to make was that you can hit the plus button and you can add a folder. So for example, if you want to add a folder and name it something like corp, hit the blue add button. You now have a folder named corp towards the top of it, and you can actually drag and drop documents in. For example, if I want to take my North Central AFD, it's right below corp. The way to do that is you hit the edit button. At this point, you can move icons around. Folder opens, drop it in there, boom. I'll click done to finish. Notice now that corp has a 1 in the corner, meaning there's one document in it, and there it is, okay? The reason, by the way, why you have to hit the edit button, like if I just press and hold on one of these now, it doesn't move. That's, again, intentional. It opens it. It doesn't move it because we didn't want you moving things around by accident while you were flying a plane. So if you ever want to delete or move things into different folders, you have to hit the edit button first. All right, we're about out of time. Which I expected to happen before we get through everything I may want to cover. But again, the point is you can learn a lot of this material by looking at the pilot's guide, which you should have already loaded by default in your documents, like I have loaded here. Or you can take a look at the YouTube videos by going to youtube.com/FlyQ EFB.